Hey everyone, Nate Burke here at Silver Maple Strategies. Thank you so much for being here today. We're going to give everyone about another minute to join, and then we will dive into the content here momentarily as we start to talk about fundraising diversification strategies. Thanks again, and we'll talk real soon. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I am Nate Burke with Silver Maple Strategies. Really grateful to have you here today to be talking about something that I think is on a lot of people's minds regarding fundraising diversification strategies, right? We're in a very interesting time in 2025, and there's a lot changing, right? There's change on the political landscape. There's change from an environmental context, which is a space I do a lot of work in. And so I'm hopeful that at the very least, you'll walk away today with some insights, some ideas. And if it's all things you've heard before, maybe it at least applies a fresh coat of paint that allows you to think about things a little bit differently as you continue in 2025 to be as successful as possible. I want to encourage you early on. I want this to be interactive. And so there should be a Q&A function here. This is admittedly my first webinar. And so at least organizing it myself and leading it. So if you'd be so kind as to leave questions in the Q&A feature. If you have any technical issues and such, let me know that too. I think commenting is disabled currently. So again, lesson learned. I'll be adapting as we go along here in the future. But at any rate, I will do my best to check periodically for questions, and I'll dedicate about 10, 15 minutes at the end for dedicated Q&A. So please leave questions early and often. Would love to get to as many of those as I can. Let me give you a quick sense of where we are going today. Looks like a lot, and it is, but I am going to do my level best to keep this high energy and practical and actionable for you. So I'm going to give you a sense of some quick housekeeping and resources you'll get as a result of attending or registering today. I know some of you are going to be viewing this as a recording asynchronously, so welcome to you as well. Regardless, this is an investment of your time, and I'm grateful whether you're here live or for the recording. Then I'll tell you a little bit about me and Silver Maple Strategies and what we do here. We'll go through some key challenges that I'm observing in the nonprofits that I see today. Walk you through the resilience leadership model, which is a proprietary framework we've developed to support our nonprofit clients in navigating all of the uncertainty with success and greater operational, financial, and impact outcomes. And then I'll walk you through those promised strategies, tie it all up with the roadmap, and give you some quick homework, right? Because who doesn't love some homework to actually take what you've learned today and put it into action in your own organization? And then at the end, I'll have a quick feedback survey. Would appreciate your input, good, bad, and indifferent. And then we'll make sure you get those resources at the conclusion of our call today. All right. With that, let's go ahead and dive in. So I promised you a few free resources. The first thing I'm going to send you, in addition to a copy of this recording, is some journaling prompts. My business coach, Ed Gandia, is a big proponent of this, and I have come to love writing ideas down out of my head as a way to get clarity and to decide what actions make the most sense next. And so I'll give you a preview of those questions as part of today's presentation, but then I'll give you a handy dandy little printout you can make or keep on your desktop to refer back. And again, if you answer those questions, even a handful of them, I think you will have some initial first steps that may help you as you are looking at diversifying your funding and really building strategic partnerships with your funders. And then secondly, look, if you have something specific that you're going through in your nonprofit, or you just like to sort of kick the tires and say, hey, what could we be doing in this area or that area to be more effective? I would love to sit down from you, no pressure, no hassle, just talk about your own situation and see if there are ways that I can add value to you. So if you'd like to schedule something like that, shoot me an email or go to the tab on my website that says book a meeting, and you'll find everything you need there. And I would really value the chance to get to know you and your organization better. All right, moving merrily along. So just a few housekeeping items as we're getting started today. The first thing I would say is emphasize focus over notes. Look, we're all busy people. I am as guilty as anybody at checking emails or sending a Slack message, even on a meeting or two. And so if you need to do that, it's okay. But I think you'll get the most value out of this by staying focused. Now, you don't have to take a ton of notes because I will share this recording with you. Happy to share slides as well if they're helpful. Silence those cell phones and desktop alerts, and definitely participate, right? I want this to be a value to you. You've invested your time to be here, so why not get out the questions that you have? And again, if you don't want to talk about that in a group setting, you're welcome to follow up with me one-on-one and we can make some time together. Two more really important pointers. Number one, suspend disbelief. So in a lot of events I go to where I'm going for, professional development or trying to learn a new strategy, I am often tempted to be like, yeah, this sounds great, but it won't work for me at all, and list the 10 reasons why. You may feel that as we're going through today's session. You may even say, look, Nate, there are things you've listed that I've tried, they don't work. But I want you to just imagine a world in which you wave a magic wand and these things actually do work. What would that mean for you and your career? What would it mean for your nonprofit? What would it mean for the clients that you serve? Be open to the possibility, even if you are resisting it with every fiber of your being on the inside. And then the last thing, I love Dan Sullivan's framework, the gap versus the gain, right? The gap is this idea that life is working against me. It's always a struggle. Things are really hard, which PS, they are right now for many people. But the gain mindset says, look, I'm going to treat today, every opportunity, everything that I face as an opportunity. I'm going to see the benefit. I'm going to see the good in it. It's very hard to do. And I've got a lot of work myself to do. But if you can see things as a gain and measure your progress against where you were or where your organization was in the past, I think you're going to be in the right frame of mind to receive some of the things I'm going to share and potentially even begin taking some actions against that. And remember, above all, you can do this. It is possible. I see people do it every day, and I know you are capable as well. So believe in yourself. All right. Who is Nate Burke? Why should you listen to me? Again, listening to me is optional. Like, you can dial out or tune out if you want to. But my background, I came out of the world of journalism. So I've worked as a professional communicator for going on 20 years now. I've worked for the past 8 years closely with nonprofit executives and their teams, both in the corporate world and for the past 3 years in my own consulting practice on business development, program implementation, and impact. Founded my consulting company back in 2022. My book focused on helping leaders who are driving public benefit find ways to more strategically develop messages that resonate with their audiences, that really help people get inspired and motivated to take action. And that includes funders, by the way. I also lead a podcast called Secrets of Social Impact Communicators on all the podcast players and soon to be on YouTube as well. And most importantly, I'm a husband, I'm a dad to 4, and I am an aspiring farmer. So our family is very passionate, and me personally, in working with nonprofits that are doing work that really matters to us personally. So for us, that looks like fighting hunger. It looks like helping families who want to adopt children make that possible. And so again, you may have your own personal causes or issues you care deeply about, and certainly the organizations you serve do as well. So I'd like people to know, like, this is not just something that I do because for no random reason. It's because I have a passion, and I've loved working arm in arm with nonprofit leaders for almost a decade. And the values, the ethic, the visionary thinking that I see in nonprofits is inspiring to me personally, and I want to help in that way. Okay, so these are just a few of the organizations we've worked with. Again, I won't spend any time on this slide, but I do really just want to say thank you to these organizations and many others I've had the privilege of meeting with over the years. It gives me so much appreciation for just all the work, all the talent that exists in the nonprofit space. My personal goal this year is helping about 50 or more nonprofit executives and their teams in these areas, right? Building confidence, increasing their capacity from a communication standpoint, from a business development and operations standpoint, and then creativity, right? Bringing the joy back to work so they can find more funding and deliver greater impact. Okay, let's dive into the content, which is why I suspect you all are here. And I want to talk about some of the key challenges that I'm observing today in the nonprofits writ large, right? This is not directed at any specific organization. This is just observations in the aggregate. And P.S., many of these are true in the corporate world as well, but because I work with nonprofits, I've tried to apply that kind of a lens to this material. So the first challenge I often see is that nonprofit teams can operate in silos. And what I mean by that is not a knock at all. It's simply a reflection of the fact that for small and mid-sized nonprofits, everyone is working so hard. There's so much going on. There are external funders and partners. There are internal strategies. There's the board of directors. And so everyone sort of gets into their lane of expertise and runs 110%. And what that means is that there's often less time for cross-pollination of ideas. There's less opportunity to take a step back and think through strategic next steps, especially from a funding standpoint. And so that can be really hard. The second challenge I often see is that many nonprofits, again, not all, but many are not necessarily fully unlocking the tools available to them in the form of artificial intelligence. Now, AI can be a very polarizing topic, so I'm not here today to suggest that you need to go all in on AI overnight and that you're going to miss the boat and that you should be investing, hundreds or thousands of dollars in these kinds of tools. What I am telling you is that from the perspective of a small business owner and from the perspective of someone who's worked with nonprofits at all sort of levels of the AI spectrum, I would tell you that the vast majority are in the early phases or the pre-adoption phase of AI. Number two, AI is too often viewed as just a time-saving device or a productivity tool, not as a strategy partner or preparing for fundraising diversification in the sense of doing research or background insights on funding partners, thinking about how to force rank specific tasks to really make sure that you're able to get value quickly and see traction as you are looking to diversify the funders that allow you to do the kind of impact-driven work that you do. And so again, that can be a real challenge. And so I see lots of wasted time, lots of overthinking that could be prevented and enhanced by using and leveraging some of these tools and integrating them into systems. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. The third piece is that oftentimes when nonprofits have a relatively short runway in terms of funding that's available to continue paying the bills, keeping people employed, getting the work done, there is a sense of being on a hamster wheel, right? We have this award. We know it's only going to last for 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. And so we're constantly making progress on that award or that series of awards, but not thinking longer term about which are specific funders that we want to build a relationship with. Which of those funders out there may we not even be aware of today whose values really align nicely with ours? And so there are opportunities. And so consequently, nonprofits are left in the sense of acting like an ATM, right? Here's our RFP request. This is what we need to do. Please give us money. Again, no nonprofit in its right mind would say exactly that. But effectively, that's the result. And so consequently, that can lead to suboptimal outcomes. Number 4, some nonprofits today are reacting instead of preparing. Again, it's very natural given the complexity that surrounds being a nonprofit in 2025. And so rather than anticipating shifts in the landscape, there is a sense of constantly being in flux, being in this gray zone of uncertainty, having this haze sort of over everything that you do. And again, through no fault of your own, right? These are just the circumstances, the hand you've been dealt. There are opportunities, I think, to break out of that. And we'll talk about that later in the session. And then finally, many nonprofits today are stuck with stale reporting, right? Impact reporting is an essential part of being a nonprofit. You are accountable to the funders who support your work, to the board that oversees it. And yet, too often, impact reporting feels like the mopping or the putting away the dishes in your house or the vacuuming. It's like, oh, I've got to do this again. And so consequently, I fear for many nonprofits that kind of mentality is reflected in impact reports. And again, not just in the reports themselves, many of which look beautiful and stunning and have lots of great data. I think there are opportunities to do even more from a storytelling standpoint, from really dialing back and saying, what does our funder need? How can we translate from just, here's what we did, sort of the to-do list that got checked off, to here are the insights that you as a strategic partner, funder ABC, might want to know as you're thinking about next steps or where do we go from here? Well, how is the landscape changing? Nonprofits are on the front lines and they can unlock a tremendous amount of value consequently for funders if they put that kind of a strategic lens against those reports. All right, so those are the challenges. Again, and there are many others that you could name, but those are the ones that stood out to me as I was reflecting on this material. I am convinced in working with nonprofits over the years that there is a better way. So here at Silver Maple Strategies, we've developed something called the Resilience Leadership Model. And the idea here is that many nonprofits are working tirelessly. They're doing very important, meaningful, purpose-driven, public benefit work. And what they really aspire to, even if this isn't the word that comes immediately to mind, is resilience, right? But instead, what you feel is a sense of rigidity, right? You're trapped in systems that maybe predated your arrival at the organization or within the industry where you work. This is how it's always been done. Yet the landscape around you is constantly changing. And so there's a tension there that gets exacerbated, especially in times where there is a lot of uncertainty or a tremendous amount of change in a short period of time. Then there's ambiguity, right? Within the organization and outside of it. So within an organization, that might look like, again, folks running in silos. It might mean the executive director and the board said this today, and then tomorrow the guidance totally changes. It might be a lack of alignment within the team on what are we doing? How much funding do we actually need? What's the strategy here to get us to that point? And when you add rigidity and ambiguity together, what you get is disillusionment, right? Can we keep doing this? Is this the right place for me? Are we ever going to make a difference? Are we going to run out of funding before December? Whatever the case might be. I don't want that for you, and I don't think you want that for you, right? So what I have observed is that organizations that can break out of that zone of rigidity, disillusionment, ambiguity will benefit tremendously from three pillars that really hold up what it means to be a resilient organization. And again, resilience is a habit, it's a practice, it's a mindset that you cultivate over time, right? It's not something where you flip the light switch on. You can't do it in a month, I don't think, and it's probably going to take, again, time and investment and adaptation to be effective and to truly build resilience across your organization. But resilient organizations are underpinned first by morale, right? The attitude, the positivity, the joy that the team brings to work. You know, you brought people onto your team, or your executive director or whoever does the hiring, pick those people for a reason, right? Sometimes people don't work out, but I suspect there are tremendous A-team players in your organization if you were just finding ways to be uplifted, to do this kind of strategic thinking and implementation. Secondly, resilient nonprofits have tremendous amounts of flexibility, right? They're able to adapt because they anticipate that things are always going to change, but their core foundation, the systems they've established, enable them to navigate and weather those storms. And then finally, clarity, right? Clarity in your communications and marketing externally, clarity with your partners, clarity with your board of directors, and clarity, frankly, internally within the nonprofit. If you can achieve those things, you are going to be light years ahead from so many organizations that are struggling day in and day out. First and foremost, because their morale is low, but then the lack of flexibility and clarity just can be the undoing of many organizations, and I don't want that for you. How do you achieve those pillars? Well, it comes down to three really power moves, right? First, communicate. Secondly, experiment, being flexible, trying new things, adapting as you learn together as an organization. And then once you have that foundation locked in, then you can really accelerate, right? You can diversify with confidence the number of funders you are building relationships with, the kind of impact you're having, the decimal point or the dollar sign on the awards that you are seeking to really deliver the most good for as many people as possible. And of course, each of those is underpinned with a variety of activities, but the ultimate objective for you is to have all of that confidence, all of that resilience, because you've made that investment in those areas. So as you're thinking about today's session, just keep this in the back of your mind, this model, and say to yourself, you know, in which of these areas are we really pretty strong right now? In which of these areas could we really use some extra investment, right? Is it morale? Is it flexibility? Is it clarity? And that will just give you a good barometer as you start to examine some of the strategies I'm going to describe, where to focus first. All right. So let's talk strategy. And let me be clear, anyone in a nonprofit can be a strategist, right? And increasingly, we have AI tools, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, that can be a strategy partner to you, right? You need a human in the loop. And again, these things can be handled and worked on across the organization. I think that's especially important when we think about small to mid-sized nonprofits that can't necessarily afford to bring full-time strategy partners on board. Look, everyone brings expertise. Everyone has a function within the organization. So when you're able to bring those talent and expertise forward, you can really start to do some of these exercises that I'm going to share. The first is to bridge the silos. And what I mean by that is, as you think about finding new funding pools, could be private foundations, could be family offices, could be corporate sponsorships for events or trainings that your organization offers. Recognize that this is not just a function of the executive director or the executive director paired with the business development vice president, as important as those roles or whatever the equivalent in your organization might be. That is really important, but there's expertise and talent inside of marketing, communications, government affairs, so many other aspects of your organization, human resources, IT. Again, depending on the size and scope of your organization, each of those team members has a role to play, because when you begin to share ideas and knowledge and what you're seeing firsthand as you work with your clients day in and day out, as you talk to other funders who are actively funding your work, that is going to really create channels of communication within your organization that unlock and enable these other four diversification strategies. Number two, using artificial intelligence to stay ahead. Again, I'm not suggesting you do this overnight. I am suggesting you methodically, but deliberately and with some haste, begin thinking about how to use artificial intelligence tools to upskill your strategy, to upskill your productivity, to add capacity. And again, that extends to research, intelligence gathering without the overwhelm, right? There are always going to be complexities and things of that nature. But as you start to try to say, look, even if we wanted to study 3 new funders, Nate, that would take an enormous amount of time. It's time we don't have. And I'm certainly not spending all of my weekend and evenings working on this. Well, I'm here to tell you, if you can use some select AI tools, again, in a way that's aligned with your ethics and values, to conduct some of that preliminary research, you are going to be blown away and you're going to be light years ahead in terms of thinking strategically about how those funders' values, areas of expertise, past programming aligns with your own. It's going to allow you to have conversations sooner. It's going to allow you to submit to RFPs or funding opportunities with greater clarity and confidence, and to begin adding value to those funders immediately. Number 3, delivering value early. Again, this is the idea of finding ways to add insight to existing funders, but also new ones as you diversify your funding portfolio in a way that positions you and your team as subject matter experts, as thought leaders in your space, whether that's health, whether it's renewable energy, whether it is agriculture, whether it's water quality. Think about ways you can add value to funders that desperately want to support this kind of work, but maybe don't have any way of finding you. So now it's on you as an organization to begin making that shift and being proactive in forging those relationships. Number 4, plan for what's ahead, right? Organizations that are nimble and focused on diversifying their fundraising strategies are recognizing, look, the funders that we've worked with in the past may not look like the funders we will work with in the future. And we need to plan for different kinds of scenarios, and we need to be building those bridges to those organizations now so that even as changes happen, we feel equipped and confident to move forward. And then finally, resilient organizations that are diversifying their funding portfolio effectively are really rethinking impact reporting, right? Impact reporting is not a drudgery or a have to. It's an opportunity to add value and insight. It's an opportunity to tell positive stories that will ripple beyond just that funder-grantee relationship. And it's an opportunity to think strategically about what comes next, right? What kind of budgets are you going to need in the future? What kind of impact do you desire to have? And then how do you begin to paint that picture for funders so that it is never a guarantee, but it presents a real opportunity for deeper, further collaboration when those foundational elements are in place. All right, so I want you to now take this a next step, and we're going to dive a little deeper into each of those 5 strategies. Before we move into our Q&A session, again, please drop your questions in the Q&A feature. Let me know what's on your mind. Let me know if there's something you disagree with. We can absolutely talk about those things too. But I want you to now go sort of beyond those usual tactics and build an adaptable strategy. So let's do this together, and let's start with number 1. I mentioned earlier that one of the things you'll get from this session today is journaling prompts. And so I've listed those prompts at the bottom of each of these slides. I won't keep any of these on the screen for terribly long, but I do want to give you a sense of the kinds of questions I'm going to be asking you. Remember that resilience leadership model. Think back to, are you looking for greater clarity? Are you looking for greater morale? Are you looking for more flexibility? Which of those 3 areas feels like the place for you to focus? And then within that lens, these journaling prompts can really help you dial in further. Okay, what is the specific need? What is the gap that I'm seeing? What is the opportunity? So when it comes to bridging silos, I've listed these journaling prompts for a few reasons. The first thing you need to do is to reset your vision. It can be very easy to get into a rut in any organization, but especially with nonprofits, it can feel demoralizing if you're not making the progress you expected, if plans are constantly changing under your feet. This is an opportunity for you to step back and say, hey, we have all these great people that I work with. Maybe if we had a conversation together and we reimagine what's possible within whatever confines or structures we may be up against, it could really be empowering, right? What is the impact we're having now is really the prompt. And then what's desired? Where could we go? What might we do instead? How could we take this thing that we're doing really well with great efficacy and kick it up to an 11, right, on the speaker dial? Look for those opportunities to find joy, certainly, which is morale boosting, but then also find ways to really redefine what's possible without compromising on your values or your mission area or your theory of change. Okay. Number 2, crunch the numbers, right? Many nonprofits I see, when you get into this reactive mindset, see an opportunity for funding and immediately gravitate toward it and start assembling the forces and the resources to figure out how we're going to put together a proposal. But there's too often not sort of a step back to say, okay, where are we going as an organization? How much money, how much funding do we need to have that kind of impact, right? This is what the future looks like if we are successful as a nonprofit. What's needed to accomplish that? And then the question becomes, is this funder a good fit? Are we aligned from a standpoint of values? Do we have experience with other colleagues or partners who've worked with this funder? Like, doing some general due diligence, I think, is really helpful. And then you can begin to say, okay, now within all of that context, if we've checked the boxes on all of those other questions, now maybe it's time to pull together the actual budget and think about submitting to this specific RFP. So I guess my encouragement here is simply, when it comes to bridging silos, start with the A players on your team that you already have, reorient yourself to your impact, your vision, your values, and only go after those opportunities that make sense, right? Look, you don't have time in a day to go after 20 or 30 opportunities at once, probably. You might have the opportunity to go after 1 to 3 really targeted, specific, high-dollar opportunities, or a few things that seem really aligned with a specific program you're working on. So you've got to use your time judiciously, and I think part of that just comes from taking a step back, taking a deep breath, and reassessing, why are we here and what are we trying to do? Number 3, map the plan, right? So what level of finances, what level of funding would we need to support the kind of impact we want? So actually start to sketch this out. It could be on paper, it could be on Google Docs, whatever your team does and can share and collaborate around. And actually, like, if you've read the book Deep Work by Cal Newport, he talks about some research in there where folks who are sort of standing around a whiteboard working on a problem together in real time can actually result in deeper thinking, better outcomes, better program design. I'm sort of extrapolating from that book. But again, the idea is that you map the plan, right? Once those key pillars are in place, and this way you start to institutionalize bridging these silos, right? And working together more strategically. Again, this takes time investment. And you're probably in lots of meetings every day, but I'm telling you, these kinds of targeted meetings, perhaps ideally preempted by some individual brain work where you're all bringing your own ideas to the table and comparing notes, is going to put you light years ahead of just sort of reactively having meetings as new RFPs are issued, trying to figure out what in the world you're going to do next. Number 2 strategy is to use artificial intelligence tools available to you that make sense, that are aligned with your values, to stay ahead. And what I mean by staying ahead is not like just staying ahead of the competition, right? Because we all know grants are frequently competitive. And that is a reality. And it's also really important that you stay ahead of your mental health. You stay ahead of your team's well-being. You stay ahead so you can be flexible and take your vacation when it's time. AI is not just a tool to race even faster and cram even more work in. It is also, and more importantly, an opportunity to experiment with new ways of doing work that are going to leave you and your team, and frankly, your partners and the clients you serve, feeling better, higher quality outputs, and more impact at the end of the day. So I want to encourage you to think through these prompts. The first one is just adopting a low-cost laboratory. Many of the AI tools today are very either free or low cost, like $20 a seat per month or something like that. Now, that's not nothing, right? And on a nonprofit budget, you have to be judicious. But think about the kinds of tests you could be running, or if you don't even know where to start, like finding someone or something that can help you sort of upskill and train you on what these tools are capable of so that you can then begin thinking about, okay, what applications might make the most sense. Next, think about systems and not just tasks, right? I hear people often say, I used AI to come up with a post for LinkedIn. Awesome, that's great. Or I used AI to develop an outline for a talk that I'm giving. That's fantastic. Where I think people fall short is that failure to recognize just how powerful these tools are as strategy partners, as tools that can take an argument or an idea and punch holes in it and make it better, as tools that can be automated for specific groups of tasks like building marketing and communications assets, pulling together boilerplate about your organization so you have that shelf of standard operating procedures like I mentioned earlier in the presentation. Having that framework and that platform built out so you can just pull it off the shelf, modify it, customize it for a specific opportunity or RFP, that can really be powerful. So again, using AI as a systems integrator can be so powerful for the organizations that choose to pursue it. And then finally, dream bigger, right? These tools undoubtedly have concerning environmental impacts. They have costs associated with them. They undoubtedly use copyrighted material to train the models. So there are a host of ethical, environmental, social impact issues that are highly problematic, and I acknowledge all of that. And I am also of the perspective that if you try these tools and keep an open mind and think about the good that can be unlocked by using them, it will not discount those negatives. It may, however, create new opportunities to do even more good in a shorter time horizon that perhaps can alleviate or address some of those, again, real issues in the future. So again, think about what could be possible, because even if a tool can't do that today, it may be able to in 3 months or 6 months. All right. Number 3 strategy, deliver value early. So the prompts that I want you to think through in this section for this strategy, number 1, I want you to pivot the way you may have historically thought about this. And I want you to think more about studying funders. Then I want you to think about specific funding opportunities. One of the learnings that I'm hearing again and again in 2025 from the nonprofit partners I work with is that, look, what felt like sure funding has gone away, or better yet, it went away and now it's back, but then it's going to go away again in 3 months. That is highly disruptive, right? I'm thankful that that funding is now back available for your clients who are benefiting from the work you're doing. And I know you also need to have a deeper strategy, right? If you think about a mutual fund, what's the purpose of a mutual fund? It is to help someone who is investing in the stock market gain value over time by diversifying that portfolio, right, into dozens, if not hundreds of different companies in the United States, in other countries, in a variety of industries, so that the net effect of all of that is that you are getting value when some of those companies are tanking, others are soaring. When one country is facing challenges, other countries are growing and booming. And so as a result, you're able to get more value as a shareholder or an investor. And in a similar way, as a nonprofit, you need to think of yourself as an investor in some sense as well, right? You're investing in strategic relationships with a diverse kind of funders that are aligned with your values and mission, but that give you greater confidence that even if funding isn't guaranteed, you have those relationships. You've made your organization visible. You've shared your thought leadership and subject matter expertise, not just sort of flippantly, maybe at a couple of conferences every year, maybe on the occasional informal phone call, but as a pattern, as a habit of what you do day to day as an organization. That is going to change the game for your organization and give you opportunities that wouldn't exist otherwise to build long-term funding relationships. And then number 2, give before getting, right? Think about ways to add values, to share insights, even when those are unsolicited, right? This is not talking about submitting unsolicited proposals to funders that say, don't give me unsolicited proposals, right? What I'm talking about is, hey, we published this free report, wanted you to have a copy. Or, hey, I saw this article about this topic. I know your funding organization invests heavily in this area. Wanted to make sure you saw this. It's those kinds of touch points that are human to human, that are sharing insight and knowledge, that are giving that organization a window into you as a person, into your 18 players, and into the kind of work and impact you do. And again, number 3 really reinforces this point. Think people, not processes, right? There's a great book out there by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy called Who, Not How. And the idea of that book is that you don't have to become an expert in a dozen different funding organizations with which you have zero familiarity. If you can find one person, a program officer, or someone else inside of that organization, or maybe an organization that's been funded by them in the past that can give you sort of the inside track on what it's like to work with them and maybe some questions you should have at the ready to ask them, that will put you light years ahead of so many people who don't take the time to invest in those small but very meaningful steps, right? It takes time, it takes intention, but wow, the results are so much stronger, again, if you make those kinds of investments. Number 4, plan for what's next. So I mentioned volatility, right? I suspect that not a few of you signed up for this session because you're in the middle of this, right? Things are changing every day. Announcements are coming out. Funding situations may be uncertain, if which is the case. I'm very sorry to hear that, and I empathize intensely. And what I want to offer to you, and again, this is one where you may feel some internal resistance, there are ways you can plan for what's next, even if you have no clue what's coming down the pike. And so some of the prompts I want you to think through are, number 1, how can we build our nonprofit to build for disruption? So what would it take to be a throw any wrench our way kind of organization, right? The moon could fall out of the sky tomorrow, or we could be presented with a $1 billion check, right? Things could go in 2 totally different directions. No matter what, this is how we operate, right? These are the values that we have. When things change, these are the protocols we have in place, right? We bring the team together. We bridge the silos. We consider multiple options forward. What could go really wrong? What could go really right? And what's the middle range, sort of average, most likely to occur scenario? And then you've mapped out your steps. Again, I'm suggesting to do this in advance of any big changes, but you can certainly do this on the fly in real time as the sky is quite literally or figuratively falling. Number 2, plan, but don't plan too much, because the temptation for many organizations is to sort of say, okay, well, here's our 3-year plan, here's our 5-year plan, here's our 10-year plan. Look, things are changing so fast today on virtually any cross-section of society, politics, environment, community, industries, pick a topic, and that time horizon is simply too much to handle. And nor does it make any sense, right? Plans you make today could be completely thrown out the window tomorrow. And so I would advocate, think 6 to 18 months out, half a year to a year and a half. So here, sitting in April 2025, think about your strategy between now and December of 2026, right? And honestly, that might even be too long. But just understand, like, think about sprints, things you could do, like experiments you could run, whether it's with AI, whether it's identifying and building strategic relationships with new funding partners or prospective partners. What are things you could adopt that are actually going to be investments in your organization's long-term sustainability and resilience? And what will deliver immediate traction, right? Maybe not immediate money in the door, but it might mean greater clarity. We're only going to focus on building these relationships, and then we're going to reassess in 30 days. We're only going to work with this AI tool on this specific function, and each of us is going to try it in the organization. We're going to report back in 2 weeks on what we found and whether we want to expand this experiment further to deliver more impact. Think like that, right? In specific waves where you can focus, try things, and regroup. And again, build your knowledge, invest in your organization's relationships, invest in its long-term financial and strategic nimbleness, and then move from there. Finally, curate your crystal ball. I think it was Wayne Gretzky who talked about skating to where the puck is going. So again, the idea of anticipating what's ahead and moving in that direction. You are the experts in the field in which you work, right? You are experts in the client type you serve. And so those kinds of insights into agriculture or health or environmental issues or whatever the case might be really positions you to see, look, you can't predict the future, but you may be able to see the writing on the wall, right? By reading industry news publications, by working with AI tools to do some cursory research and to sort of run some predictive scenarios. Assume like something crazy happens, like what's possible, what would the positive and negative implications for the kinds of clients in the specific industry we serve. Again, you can create your own crystal ball, and it's certainly never going to be perfect, but there are some fundamentals that never change. There's a really great book by Morgan Housel. I think it's called Same as Ever. I would highly recommend that book. You can tell I like to read, so this is like a book review session as well. But that book, Same as Ever, talks about the fundamentals of human behavior and society that never change. So familiarizing yourself with some of those principles through history, through, again, your experience and subject matter expertise in your nonprofit can really help you gain clarity into, okay, where do we need to be moving? How can we start integrating that into our workflows, into our funding diversification strategy? And finally, rethink impact reporting. Again, this strategy is important because once you've started to build a more diversified pool of funders, you can begin to tell those stories of impact in increasingly powerful ways. And in fact, as you are sharing insights proactively with funders you aren't even working with yet, you're going to get into this habit, this mindset of always adding value, always being visible. And again, it can be uncomfortable, but to the degree that it's possible, having some of those conversations and using that can really be integrated into your impact reporting. So, three principles to think about here as you're journaling. Number one is this idea of less is more, right? So, how could we take our existing reports, go back to what our funders have asked for, make sure we're checking all of those boxes, but then make sure we're not doing excessively more than that, right? Most funders are not looking for essays, they are looking for evidence of progress, evidence of accountability, right? Evidence their investment is actually making a difference. One of the benefits, I think, for the organizations on this call that might be thinking, look, like we've had a number of federal grants in the past, perhaps you still do, but we're also looking beyond that. I found that many organizations outside of the government often have lower levels of reporting requirements. Certainly they want detail and insight, but it may actually be less than you think. And so you can actually pare back to add more value because you're valuing people's busy schedules. The executives who work at these funding organizations don't often have a lot of time. If you're trying to communicate to reviewers, again, less is often more. So think about that. Number two, think in dashboards, right? How do I take all of these data points or stories of impact and package that visually in compelling ways or through bullet points? So again, think about ways and assess what you're doing today and think through, are there ways that we could effectively engage new funding partners, either through our impact reporting after a program or even pre-award? Are there opportunities to engage in a way that is concise, compelling, persuasive? And then finally, summarize and then expound, right? So oftentimes in an impact report, you are talking to multiple audiences, right? You are talking to the chief, the head person at the funding institution, but you're also talking to your funding program officer or day-to-day point of contact. And so if you can lead with an executive summary and then dig into the deeper levels of nuance that a program officer might care about, you also spoken effectively to the highest ranks of that organization to make sure that when it comes time to discuss you as a grantee, leadership and program officers and other stakeholders have a better sense of who you are familiarized, can talk conversantly about you. Again, you are an enabling force in this conversation, and you do, in fact, have agency. So definitely take advantage of that. So this is a quick dashboard. I know that was a ton of material. We have about 15 minutes left. So we're going to get close here into Q&A and also into a quick survey. I love your input on whether this was helpful to you, and if so, what you want to learn next. But this dashboard really captures the funding diversification roadmap I've laid out. And I hope that these journaling prompts can really help you start to think about ways to begin evaluating what's working now and what might work even better in the future, all with an eye toward greater resilience, financial resilience, operational resilience, resilience of the impact you can increasingly deliver at higher and better levels of service. All right. I promised you there would be homework. So here's your homework. What are 3 top funding diversification initiatives you'll undertake this month? Now, for some people, it's like 3 is way too much, right? I barely have time for 1. So in that case, I would just say focus on 1. Of all of the things that may have jumped out at you today or that triggered like, I wonder, I never really thought about it that way. Think about one of those things, at least up to 3, and list out what will you do or what will you explore and who will you designate to take that step, right? It might be you personally. It might be someone that you work with that you need to have a conversation and see if they'd be open to looking into that further. So take a minute. I'm going to take a drink and then we're going to move into survey and Q&A. All right. I hope you've had a time, even if you haven't really digested much of any of this, which I don't expect you to have at all. Hopefully you've got something in mind as a starting point, right? Based on everything we've discussed today. Here's why it's so important to take action, right? Many of you are Wendell Berry fans, at least in the food and ag and conservation circles I run in. I know Wendell Berry is often a popular author, thinker. He said, "The earth, which we all have in common, is our deepest bond. And notice our behavior toward it cannot help but be an earnest of our consideration for each other and for our descendants." So I will say very publicly, a lot of the clients I serve work on environmental issues, climate change, water quality, soil health, food and agriculture. And it's important. And one of the reasons I love working with nonprofits and in that space specifically is that there is so much right now that is out of our control. But if we take a moment to step back and recognize the value that you as an individual leader are bringing to the space in which you work, right? This is not just for today. This is not even for next year. It's for future generations, right? It's for the earth. It's for the people who inhabit it. It's for your family. It's for my family. This work matters. And if you don't take action in at least one or two of these areas now, who is going to be the one to step forward to actually do that, right? What are the consequences of inaction? If I change nothing in my nonprofit, do things get better? Do I help more people? Do we have the kind of impact we need on the time horizon that we have to sort of stick the landing on in order to be successful? Those are the kinds of questions I would think about. I think this quote from Wendell Berry really speaks to this idea of you are doing work in the nonprofit space that goes beyond your sphere of influence and really does matter. So make it count. That's really my admonition. All right, we're going to move into Q&A, and I'm going to pull up and see what kinds of questions we have here to look at. One of the observations that I would share with this group today is that there are many leaders out there who are having lots of meetings in the nonprofit world. There are plenty of conversations happening about the struggle is real, right? Funding is uncertain. There are lots of unknowns. What I want to encourage this group to think about, though, is it's okay to vent, right? You can have those conversations. And I worry very deeply about too many nonprofits or universities or those in academic settings. So much of that talk can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? We will never get ahead. The funding's not there. It's only a matter of time before the hammer falls. I don't want that for you, and I don't think you want that either. And so if there are ways that you can step into the gap, again, step into the gap and into the game and offer ways of thinking differently, right? Or thinking about what might be possible, encouraging your colleagues to consider talking more broadly about what's possible, thinking about the funding organizations that might be out there and finding someone you can talk to about, hey, what organizations even exist that fund this kind of work? Fill in the blank. Find someone, a person. It could be me. It could be someone in your network. It could be someone within your institution. But try to have some of those conversations. And then you can be the one in the coffee meeting or the let's scramble and figure this out conversation to say, hey, let's take a step back and reconsider, what are we here for? What is the strategy? What is the impact we desire? And look, you may personally already be resisting some of the things that I've shared, right? So for example, I know for a fact there is deep resistance to artificial intelligence in some circles, right? And it can be confusing, it can be scary, it can be I am so morally opposed to this, and that is certainly an option, right? That's certainly an option. I think I would go back, though, to what I raised at the beginning, which is keep an open mind. If you aren't comfortable trying it or feel wrong about it, maybe just watch a couple of YouTube videos or check out a Substack. So someone that is a really great thinker, many of you probably are familiar with, is Ethan Mollick. I can't recall the name of his Substack, One Big Thing or something along those lines. But Ethan Mollick is both a researcher, an academic, and also someone who's very capable of talking with the average person like you and me about these kinds of things, what the tools are capable of. If you want the sort of inverse of people who are AI skeptics, I recommend Ted Gioia. His last name is spelled Gioia. And I would say that Ted is a cultural commentator who's written a number of books, writes about music and pop culture and sort of the automation of society. And again, very candidly, very openly opposed to many of that. And so I think the more that you as a nonprofit leader can get a balanced and nuanced view of AI tools or some of the strategies I've shared today, working across cross-functionally within your nonprofit, you'll develop your own opinions and perspectives, and you'll draw clear lines in some cases. And in other cases, those lines may be more gray. But the point is you're making progress toward greater funding diversification and ultimately, as an organization, greater resilience. I'm not seeing any questions, and we have about 5 minutes left. So I always like to be as generous as possible and give people time back. So I just want to say, from the bottom of my heart, I really love working with this community. Thank you for being here today, whether you're live or on the recording. Reach out anytime. I love talking about these kinds of issues. I love to pick your brain and learn what you're seeing, how you're showing up and leading in the space of building greater resilience in your funding, in your operations. And look, it may not make sense to do anything with this for a while, but I think that the opportunities and the challenges I've outlined are probably real for many people. And so if there is something that you can do, even just one step, take that step, think it through, work with your team, and see what's possible and experiment, right? Come back to the drawing board and say what worked and what didn't. So learn, grow, focus on resilience, and until next time, I'm Nate Burt with Silver Maple Strategies. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in and for your comments and questions. And we will talk to you again next month. And stay tuned to your email and to your LinkedIn for the next month's topic. I'll talk to you soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.